it's difficult to talk about different cultures getting along. I have a rule about different cultures. If you put two different ethnic groups side by side, they'll generally do two things. They'll intermarry and go to war. And so uh, cultures don't always get along. And I think that's true in how we think as well in many other ways. Next slide, please, Nancy. So I don't have any financial disclosures to make. Next slide, please. So I'm going to describe specific examples of some healing modalities used by traditional Native American healers, mostly of the U.S. and mostly in the upper Midwest, which I know best, although I've been a few other places and I might go there to make an example or two. I wouldn't pretend to know about all of the different healing modalities used by the hundreds of tribes in the U.S., but I'm going to talk about some of those that I've been close to. Also, I'm going to provide a comparison of some modern Western medicine modalities and Western spirituality to traditional Native American spirituality and healing practices. Spirituality tends to be a part of the healing practices generally in Native American practices, and that's not always the case. We have visitation for ministers, but generally we think God is fine in the Western medicine, but we don't want him in our business. And then last of all, I'm going to talk about possible collaborations. So going back to a fairly well-known physician that's been talked about for a long time, Hippocrates said the natural healing force within each one of us is the greatest force in getting well. And so first of all, I'm going to talk about some of these specific examples of healing modalities used by tribes. Herbalism has been around for a long time. This 1928 book by the famed ethnologist Francis Densmore talks about the healing plants of the Ojibwe people who I work with now and have worked with for quite a while. And this is a sweat lodge. And, I think years ago, people in Scandinavia or in northern parts of America learned that it was difficult to take a bath in the wintertime. So they didn't decide to chop a hole in the ice and jump into the water. They learned about how to make a sweat lodge or a sauna and go in there and wash, and learned that the heat was healing, and then it became associated with the purification of the body and also of the mind, and became a spiritual event where people would pray and purify spiritually. And there's always singing and praying or group sharing and self-reflection. And as Dr. Jolly was saying, it's said in there sometimes when it's real hot that the suffering is good for our spirituality. This is Jimmy Jackson. He was one of the medicine men of his time. There weren't very many people like Jimmy around years ago. He was an herbalist, a singer. He was a ceremonial and prayer leader. He was a namer. He would give Indian names to children. He was their way, and he was a pipe carrier. This is the Hauser Peace statue in Norman, Oklahoma. Peace is a healing state of mind, I think, and it's said that peace can be found through the pipe at times, and I believe that's true. This is Dr. Basil Johnston. It was a Canadian Ojibwe, and the Vision Quest is one of the pipe ceremonies. Dr. Johnston, I like to quote when he says, "Without a vision, a man is incomplete." I don't know if it's just limited to men. I think years ago, in my experience down in South America, where many of the women there were pretty much pregnant from puberty to menopause, and that's how it was in my grandma's generation. So I think sometimes some of those ladies' lives were more defined for them. But I think maybe for all of us, vision is important in this life, to have some purpose, like Dr. Jolly was talking about. So the Ojibwe people, it's said, had a vision and prophecies that they should go west to a place where the food that grew on the water, and they were to stop at various points where the shell showed itself and finish the migration when the shell appeared for the last time. So these were prophecies to be fulfilled, and they believed in that enough that they headed west and stopped in current day Montreal, Lake Nipissing in Canada, Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and finally got to Madeline Islands, the Apostle Islands in Wisconsin, and the land in Minnesota, where most of the Ojibwe people live today, in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Again, Jimmy was a traditionalist. I wanted to talk a bit about Sitting Bull. In the Dakotas, the Sundance is one of the sacred ceremonies of the pipe. Sitting Bull was a pipe carrier, a singer, a prophet, and a warrior. A prophet, you say? Well, I would say yes. And if anybody wants to read about Sitting Bull's Sundance, he danced the Sundance many times, but his famous Sundance was in the summer of 1876. And he was dancing to ask the Great Spirit what to do about the Americans when he had a vision of the American soldiers falling into camp and heard a voice. I give you these who have ears but do not hear. They say that a vision was fulfilled by Custer's last stand. And I always wonder how the Lakota Nation, with 1,700 or 2,000 troops, defeated the United States of America, that had just gotten done losing 600,000 or 700,000 troops in the Civil War, turning itself into the mightiest military nation on earth. Either, I would say, it comes down to a couple of things. Either they got very, very lucky, or the warrior god reached in, took the deck, and dealt the hand. You may ask, what do visions in war have to do with healing? And I think they can have quite a bit to do with it. If we can prophesy the future, we might be able to prophesy, if you do this, that will happen. And so I give some of these dramatic examples. The Lakota pipe traditions are carrying on. This is Stanley Looking Horse. I had good fortune to meet Stanley and his wife, Cecilia. And these are the 7 ceremonies of the Lakota people and the Dakota people: the Sweat Lodge, the Vision Quest, the Sundance, the Making of Relatives, the Keeping of the Soul, the Preparation for Womanhood, and the throwing of the ball is not much carried out anymore. It's moved more to the sacred pipe ceremony. But I like quoting Black Elk. He said, "It's not expected that in every generation someone will catch the ball. But what disturbs me now is that I see no one trying to catch it." So I guess some of that is lost in the symbolism of the ceremony, which is kind of disappearing itself. This is Stanley Looking Horse's mother, Lucy Bad Warrior Looking Horse. She was born in 1894 and was the 17th carrier of the Lakota pipe. She was the first and only female carrier of the pipe. Her grandson Arvol has the pipe now, and that pipe has been passed through 19 generations and carries those ceremonies. And I think that's all right. I think that the prejudice against some of these native ways led Lucy to carry that pipe to her son, to the next generation. These ceremonies, these pipe ceremonies, they had to go underground. They were they were persecuted. They were told they weren't supposed to pray this way. Not only the Lakota people, but many of the tribes, and so it's just because of the diligent faith of a few of these folks, like Lucy and Stanley and others, that some of these things made it to the present times. This is a peyote cactus, and speaking of people having to defend their religions, why, I knew a gentleman quite well, Benny White, up at the Leech Lake Reservation, who told me he had the FBI at his house questioning him about his religion. And in self-defense, the peyote group sought incorporation under state laws, first in Oklahoma and then the Native American Church of North America. Interestingly, a gentleman named Joseph Wilson, who was of the Caddo and Delaware tribes, had a vision that they should put the Bible on the altar. And they put the Bible on the altar, and they found the police didn't break up their prayer meetings as often when they did that. Or if they did come in, they'd say, well, we're having a prayer meeting. And they'd see the Bible on the altar, and oh, well, that's fine. Go ahead then. After 2 trips to the Supreme Court, the roadmen, or the prayer leaders of the Native American Church, now have a DEA number for peyote. And I think this still illustrates the peyote religion, some of the prejudices that exist against Native religion. I had a patient who told me one time his doctor had told him, you can get in a lot of trouble for that peyote. So if you've got your doctor telling you you can get in a lot of trouble for the sacrament in your church, I don't think that encourages you to share with your provider. And actually, I went back to the provider. I thought, I better talk to him. And I started talking to him. He says, well, so-and-so's son went down to Texas and was picking those cactuses and ended up in a Texas penitentiary. And so this is an interesting thing. The peyote is still illegal for anybody but bona fide members of the Native American Church. So I think in ways, our society still harbors some of these prejudices against some of these old Native ways. And this is a beautiful Native American church ceremony. I've been to some of these. I think I mentioned Benny White. He told me, Fred, I've invited every doctor who ever came through this hospital of ours to come to one of our prayer meetings. You're the first one that ever showed up, so thank you. And I always think this is a beautiful picture of an old water drummer in the church. This is Leonard Crow Dog, was a Sicangu Lakota. He was a spiritual leader, singer, political activist, a pipe carrier, Native American church roadman. And again, these substances are still illegal for people in America. So I think people sometimes are still carrying this disapproval and don't want to talk about these things when you ask them. And we have to realize that's fine too. Leonard was a good singer. So I want to now talk about comparison of some modern Western medicine modalities in Western spirituality to traditional Native American healing practices. Again, why are we bringing in spirituality is because that's a part of a lot of Native practices. I have a collection of medicinal plants from the Sacharuna tribe of the Upper Amazon Basin in the Harvard Botanical Museum and the Chicago Field Museum of Natural History. And there are a lot of medicines in that collection that we use every day. When I first made that collection, it was mostly all folklore. many of the pharmaceutical companies knew what were in those plants because they had gone around and talked to all the native healers and all the Chinese herbalists and the African healers and found out what they were using and what was in them, and then patented those drugs and sold them back to us at a profit. The ABC, the American Botanical Council, has now really expanded the German Commission E monographs, and this knowledge is really quite up to date now on many of these plants. So I'm just going to go through a bunch of medicinal plants quickly, and not all of these will be native plants. I think many of us have heard of aspirin. Aspirin, all of the non-steroidal drugs originally come from willow. Ojibwe people use willow bark to treat rashes. They build the sweat lodge out of willow. It's used as a smoke for headache and fever. The Dakota people used willow in similar ways and also made bark tea for the same types of ailments. We were talking about metformin a bit ago as the first line treatment. This is the metformin flower, Galega officinalis, and it is one of the preferred first line oral blood glucose lowering agents for diabetes. Many of us in the United States have a cholesterol problem. This is a Chinese red rice yeast, the source of the very first statin, lovastatin. All of the statins were derived from that molecule, and they're the first line treatment for high cholesterol, hyperlipidemia. The Vincal alkaloids are from the periwinkle plant. These came from Africa and the Philippines. This is a cancer chemotherapy agent that was used in traditional medicine in Africa and the Philippines. Atropine is a troponin alkaloid, an anticholinergic drug. It's used to dilate the pupils, and for ACLS, it's from a deadly nightshade, Atropa belladonna, which, as the name sounds, you can overdose, and this can be deadly. There's a group of these. In the next slide, you'll see another one. Scopolamine, I see an FYI about willow bark protecting from stress. Scopolamine is another one of the tropane alkaloids. It's a potent anticholinergic and anti-nausea drug. Various other uses found in the henbane plant, Hyoscyamus niger. Next slide, please. I'm just going to go through a group of these kind of quickly. Hyoscyamus is a drug for gastrointestinal UTI and spasm, used in pre-anesthesia and reduces bradycardia during surgery. Also, it reverses neuromuscular blockade from Mandragora autumnalis. Native healers a lot of times use dreams. I call the vision quest a dream incubation ceremony. And I think, Clara Hill, Carl Jung, others recognize the value of dreams. I've had a patient tell me that he gets advice from the great snowy owl. He'll come into his dreams and say things like, "Watch out for termites." Well, I think about that. What does that represent? Those things that we can't see that get in the very fabric of where we live. And so it gets kind of mystical when you've got owls talking to you, just like I'm speaking to you now. And I think we have to try to realize we don't all have the same conceptions and concepts and strategies and how to live and what life's about. And we have to be open to worldviews that are not our own when we're working with people from another culture. I like to mention Daniel 9:3 because when I read the Bible, this sounds like a vision quest to me. I turned to the Lord God and pleaded with him, and pleaded with him in prayer and petition in fasting and in sackcloth and in ashes. And I've been told people go out to pray. They pray all day long, or 2, 3, 4 times. They don't eat. They don't drink. They only are given a buffalo robe or an army blanket to cover up with. One gentleman even had ashes smeared on his face by the medicine man, who said, you're going to go before the great spirits. You want to be pretty humble, look maybe even pitiful, and they'll help you perhaps. And Native people will often talk about spirits. Daniel goes on to say, while I was still in prayer, Gabriel, the man I had seen in the earlier vision, came to me in swift flight. He instructed me and said, Daniel, I have now come to you to give you insight and understanding. I had a gentleman tell me how Sitting Bull would come to him 100 years dead in his dreams and teach him. And I think it might be easiest for us to say, oh, so Sitting Bull talks to you 100 years after he's dead, and not think about the possibility that in dream time, a person can come to us across large distances or even across death and still speak with us. And maybe some of the first human ideas of a human spirit come from that. Heat therapy, as I was mentioned, is used in the sweat lodge. It can reduce pain and spasm, increase blood flow, and do a number of things. It can be used before exercise or in chronic conditions, and it should not be applied during the inflammatory phase. So this is a book written by Alan Watts, who was high in the Anglican Church of England in Canterbury Cathedral, and he talked about the use of LSD, mescaline, and psilocybin. The legality of all of these things is being discussed again now. Dr. Watts felt that when these medications were used and accompanied with sustained philosophical reflection by a person who was in search not of kicks but of understanding, they could provide insight. And this is a book on LSD psychotherapy by Czech psychiatrist Stanislav Grof. He's still going. He lives in the United States now. He's 92. He's still associated with Johns Hopkins University and Esalen Institute. And he's been awarded a number of awards. Dagmar and Václav Havel from the Czech Republic gave him the Vision 97 award, and he received the Thomas R. Verney Award for the Association of Pre- and Perinatal Psychology and Health. This is illegal in the United States at this time for therapy, but the legalization of it is being discussed again. So I'm going to go into the benefits of collaboration of modern Western medicine with traditional healers. And the next slide I was going to talk about is a statement by Dr. Everett Rhodes.
Brett,
And yes.
before we go on, there was a question about, are there any common plant-derived medicines for encephalitis, inflammation in the brain, or increasing gut health that you could recommend?
Yes, and Nancy, I was just going to wait until after he was done, but if you do want to answer that right now, that's fine.
I just thought this would be a good stopping point.
Yeah, let me just take a second. You know, I'm not an herbalist, and like I said, I've been interested for a long time, and I made that collection in 1987. But like I was saying, at that time, there just wasn't the information around like there is now. And what I would do is refer the question to Dr. Tiarona Lodog. Dr. Lodog is a Comanche. She's an MD. I would say she's one of the world's authorities on herbal medicines at the present time. I know a little bit about these things, but I mostly order the pills that come from them. Now that they've become more of a part of possible medical practice with the efforts of the German E-Commission and people like Dr. Lodog, I'm hoping to take some classes and learn more about them. I have patients that come to me who are using these things, and it's so useful to be able to refer to that reference and see, well, you want to be careful with this one if someone's pregnant, or this one might interfere with this, that, or the other medication that you're using. These are medicines. They have the same kind of interactions with other medicines and benefit or injury during pregnancy and lactation as other medicines. So they have to be respected.
We'll go ahead and move on, but before we do, what was her name again? Her first name?
Tiarona. I believe it's Tierona, and then the last name is Lodog. 2 words. Low,
Perfect.
like close to the ground, dog.
Okay, perfect. Because we might check to see if she could speak to us someday.
She does give talks, yes, and she's one of the world's authorities on this at the present time.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and move on to your next.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about collaboration. This is Everett Rhodes. I mentioned him earlier. He wrote this book, Innovations in Healthcare Promotion and Policy. He was the first Native American director of the Indian Health Service. Everett told me, my mother always had a pitcher of peyote tea in the refrigerator. Discussing it with him, it sounded like she might do some microdosing at times. Next slide, please. Dr. Rhodes talked about an issue at the Navajo hospital. The medicine man had come to the Navajo hospital after medical officials made an urgent appeal and called him in after 2 patients fled the hospital and others were preparing to leave. Lightning, which some Navajos believe can be a cause of illness, had twice struck a tree on the hospital grounds. And people felt like the hospital and its patients had to be blessed and the spirits had to be placated. And when this was done, the patients settled back with confidence that the danger had been warded off. I had a patient who was actually a Lakota lady, and she was married to a Navajo gentleman, and she told me her mother was struck by lightning twice when she was pregnant with her, and one had come through the picket fence and jolted her mother's hand a little bit, and she had to recoil away, and the other had come through the telephone and knocked the telephone out of her hand. And so I thought about that. I don't know what the chances are of being hit by lightning are. I'd say they're pretty low, and surviving it, that's probably lower. To think about the chances of someone being hit by lightning twice when they were pregnant with one pregnancy, it seems like it really is a kind of a long shot odd. Interestingly, that girl's Lakota name is Southern Thunderbird Woman, and being married to a Navajo gentleman, she told how when her fiance heard that, he said, "Oh, that's no good." So they went down to confer with a Navajo lightning singer, and he concurred. "Oh, that's no good," he said. No, that's no good. And so they had to have a lightning way sing for her. Some of these Navajo sings can take 8 days. They can be as long as the New Testament, and they need to be sung word perfectly. So they're really quite a production. And the Navajo has done quite a bit at the reservation to have accommodations for medicine people right on the grounds. They have a hogan because some of the ceremonies have to involve a sand painting, which is drawn on the earth, and it has to be drawn on the ground. And also, when they were building the Navajo hospital, they consulted the medicine people about the healing room, and they have a chimney there because they have a fireplace, and around the chimney, going up for 2 floors, are windows, because the medicine people told them they had to look out the smoke hole and see the sky. And so I'm glad to say the Indian Health Service accommodated that by building this windowed chimney, which the medicine people agreed would be adequate. Next slide, please. This is Herb Sam. Herb was a traditional healer at the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe clinics. He knew how to identify over 100 plants that he'd learned from his grandfather. He only used 50 of them. In his traditions and in the way he worked, he had to get permission from his dreams to use the things. And so, again, you know, this is a different worldview than our worldview, and we have to be able to accept the fact not everybody thinks the same as we do, and that doesn't mean that we're always right. And Herb was quite a fisherman. I don't know that he was going to eat this jug that he pulled out of the river, but he seems pretty happy with his catch. Just talking about herbalism again, this is a page from ABC, and ABC is really an excellent source if someone wants to have references for how to use medicinal plants. They will give the contraindications, side effects, uses in pregnancy and lactation, dosage and administration. Herb, who I showed you in the previous slide, always carried with him a herbal PDR. I teased Herb about liking to work with herbs, but at any rate, he carried an herbal PDR, which was out while he was still working over for the Mille Lacs Band, and that had a lot of this information. So he would confirm that. At any rate, back to the Navajos, the newly appointed IHS director a number of years ago became aware of the important role that was sometimes played by the medicine men in improving community health traditions. And he recognized the value of inculcating traditional practices in the IHS. You know, I wanted to look up the word inculcate, which by definition means instilled by persistent instruction. And I was thinking you really had to probably inculcate the need for working with traditional medical practices to physicians. It's hard to teach somebody something when they know just about everything. But at any rate, he arranged tours of IHS clinics and hospitals by the medicine people and acquainted them with medical procedures and practices, and vice versa. And they've had a collaboration there for quite some time. Some of these collaborations were boosted by the 1978 American Indian Religious Freedom Act, and also the I believe it was 1990 American Indian right to practice religious freedom, which it took 2 trips to the Supreme Court to get Native people in America the freedom to be able to practice their religions. As the title indicated, this legislation was primarily designed to protect American Indian religions. I have a note up there. Some medications require the spiritual in order to work, and I believe that, you know, like I was telling you about my friend Herb Sam, he said that he he had to get the permission of the plants, and he would fast and pray and they do these dream incubation ceremonies to get permission to use these things. And so it's a different worldview than really it's embraced by Western medical people in general. Next slide, please. So the Indian Health Service has reflected on the importance of religious expression in much Indian healing, and one of the early directors issued the following policy statement: that the Indian Health Service has continued to recognize the value and efficacy of traditional beliefs, ceremonies, and practices of the healing of the body, mind, and spirit, and it's therefore the policy of the Indian Health Service to encourage a climate of respect and acceptance in which an individual's private traditional beliefs become part of the healing and harmonizing within his life. And again, I was thinking about some conversations Nancy and I had. Some of these people, as I mentioned, that I have known, have still carried that disapproval that comes from the health departments and providers, and so it's their right not to have to express that. Someone's asking what's my thoughts about food as medicine. Well, I'm a diabetes guy. You know, I treat a lot of diabetes. Food is medicine. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we get all our vitamins and minerals from food, and plants are foods and have medicines. I think food is a medicine. So, at any rate, in the Indian Health Service, we try to recognize the right of people to have their traditional beliefs and try to facilitate that when they're ill with this climate of respect and acceptance. And so a policy in the Indian Health Service is explicit in regard to American Indian patients that when an Indian Health Service patient, a guardian, or a family member requests assistance in obtaining the services of a native practitioner, every effort will be made to comply. And such efforts might include contacting a native practitioner for the folks, or providing space or privacy within a hospital room for a ceremony, and also the authorization even of contract health funds to pay for a native healer consultation when necessary. An early collaboration among the Public Health Service and the Indian Health Service, again going down to the Navajo Nation, and this was a Cornell University Medical School project that in the Many Farms community, a 10-year project from 1952 to 62, was designed to examine the feasibility of a comprehensive community-oriented system of healthcare to the Navajo community. I've got a couple of slides on this. It was an outgrowth of earlier studies conducted by Cornell physicians of the newly introduced isoniazid for the treatment of tuberculosis among Navajo people. And not surprisingly, the Many Farms demonstration project had the inclusion of an anthropologist and looked at the interface of traditional native healing and modern medicine. This was really the first project that gave systematic attention to native medicine, and it began in the mid-20th century with two simultaneous occurrences: the Many Farms demonstration project and the 1955 transfer of Indian Health Service from the Department of the Interior to the DHHS, now Health and Human Services. And Everett Rhodes, who I showed you a picture of earlier, was the Assistant Surgeon General from 1982 to 93. And as mentioned, he was the first Native American director of the IHS. And this is a study about integrating spiritual and Western treatment modalities in the Native American Substance Use Center, a provider perspective. When substance abuse programs add cultural elements relevant to Natives the experimental group showed greater improvement in substance use measures at post-test and at 6-month follow-up. And substance use is one spot where spirituality is just absolutely part of the cure, and people have to be comfortable. You can't tell them what spirituality they're going to practice. They have to find that for themselves. So this isn't surprising. Music therapy. Native Americans and other indigenous groups use music often to enhance traditional healing practice. It's been a tool of healing since ancient times. Greek philosophers talked about it. David in the Bible played the harp to ease King Saul's depression. Again, it's difficult to compare diverse traditions from around the globe, but music therapy studies that were conducted in hospitals in the late 20th century found that music is medicine. It can have a positive effect on clinically relevant outcomes. So it was finally we decided that all of this healing that had been going on for the last several thousand years was clinically relevant. Again, back to the Many Farms project. The project's analysis of traditional native healing is perhaps the only semi-quantitative approach to the subject, and it gives some information that's still useful. Part of the success of the program laid in the recognition that first, it's got to be recognized this isn't a situation of compromising alternatives. Patients may believe that both systems have something to offer. They both work. And I think as we go forward, if we're working with Native elders or Native people in general, it's good for us to remember that their traditional healers may have something to offer as well, something that may not be as different as we might have in some ways. Other things might be quite different. And I think we need to leave that up to the patients and their Native medical providers. So Medicaid is looking at this and moving forward. CMS had this seminar just this month, a couple of days ago, actually, about a week ago, on the Medicaid coverage of traditional healthcare practices provided at Indian Health, and this is moving forward. I'm happy to say it's hard to work without a salary, I think, and oftentimes Native healing was paid for with gifts. But I think this will help to preserve some of these practices, which can be informative to all of us. So going back, the power of holistic medicine is the healing of the spirit, mind, and body. Really, we're all made up of these diverse things in our one self, and it's important to attend to all of these things in humans, I would say. And I think Native medicine has showed me a lot of that. I've had a wonderful career in the Indian Health Service over the last 30 or 40 years, so I'm thankful for it. Again, as Hippocrates said, the natural healing force within each one of us is the greatest force in getting well, and whether we're unlocking that with plant medicines or with dreams or with music or other things, ultimately it's not the pill that heals us or the song that heals us. It's ourselves that the healing comes from, and Hippocrates recognized this all those years ago. So we talked about some specific healing modalities that were used by traditional Native American healers. Again, mostly of the Midwestern U.S. I went down to the Navajo for some of these examples where some of this work has been done. And I talked about a comparison between our Western medicine modalities and Western spirituality to traditional Native American spirituality and healing practices. And I myself recognize the benefits of collaboration between us, medical doctors, and traditional Native American healers. I hope other physicians, maybe someone that heard this talk will as well. So again, once more, I just want to ask my elders to excuse me. I wanted to say something good, and I hope I didn't rub anybody wrong. So thank you all very much. I want to end with some words of Sitting Bull. Again, he was a holy man in chief. He said, let us put our minds together and see what kind of life we can make for our children. We're still troubled here on earth, and I think we need to keep working at this. So again, thank you very much.